Okay, great. Thank you. So welcome to PTA Triage. Michelle actually did help design some of the graphics here. And when I saw that she used, the actual graphic of a medical person, I was like, oh, fun for me because I always wanted to be, a doctor or a nurse or someone in medicine. So while I don't get to do that in reality, I can play along with the PTA version of triage at least. So the real question here is your PTA kept afloat by a small number of PTA leaders and active members? That probably sounds really familiar. We hear that often from people that it's just like, it's a small group of us. How do we do all this? We're going to share the most essential and impactful things for you and your volunteers to focus your precious time and energy into. So like medical professionals in an urgent situation, you are looking for ways to prioritize your efforts to make the biggest difference. So many of you are new to PTA, and even this triage process might feel a little overwhelming, but the point is to make sure that you have the basics at your fingertips, and also that you know that you can call on us for support through any of it. So let's get started. On the next slide. So here's a look at our agenda for this session. We're talking about bylaws first. Why are we talking about bylaws? I'd say most often when I receive a question from a PTA leader on email, that question can usually be found in the bylaws. We're still happy to answer your questions on email or have phone calls with you, but a lot of your answers can be found in the bylaws. So we're going to break those down for you today. We are going to talk about the financial review, which used to be known as the PTA audit. So if you've been around in PTA for a little bit, you may be familiar with the mid-year audit and the end-year audit. It's now called a financial review. Another resource we have for you is the PTA calendar. So this is a month-by-month breakdown of what's due when. We'll talk a little bit about the culture of your PTA's community with DEIB, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, that brings about the B for belonging. And a lot of us here have a habit of saying yes all the time to being asked to do things. So we're going to talk about some tips to simplify and share responsibilities and end up with leaving you with a couple other resources. So moving on to the next slide. So mentioned, most answers are going to be found in your bylaws. And you can join me in the breakout at the end of this morning's training to get more deep into bylaws. But bylaws usually get a bad rap. People make a joke about them being sort of bedtime reading and sleepy reading. But they are really like the GPS for your nonprofit organization. It outlines the basic framework of a PTA. It's like a roadmap. So when the bylaws are used well, they can be help you build trusted relationship between your board members and your association members. But when the bylaws are not followed, it could be a sign that your PTA is going in the wrong direction. So like a GPS. It is a legally binding document that governs PTA. Sometimes it needs to be submitted to government agencies or to banks. We'll sometimes ask for bylaws, although not all banks do. Every board member should know and understand their content. So the bylaws are a part of a healthy PTA routine in keeping with the theme of triage. Have small committees review them annually, and you can update them at any time, but they are required to be updated every 5 years. So that has extended a bit. It used to be every, I forget now, 2 or 3 years, but they're not required to be updated, but every 5 years, although I would recommend doing that probably more often, but they should be at least reviewed annually. They will share which officers your PTA has, so you can find out how many, which officers are in your PTA for both the elected and appointed officers. And they list your meeting times and how often you meet. They list the regular day for both executive board meetings and the membership meetings. And they talk about how much notice you need to give in advance for a regular meeting, things like that. And again, we'll go into more detail if you join the parliamentarian breakout in the afternoon or later this morning. And the next slide, so talking about quorums, what is a quorum? A quorum is the minimum number of people that you need to have in the room in order to take action or to vote. And that goes, you have a quorum for your board meetings and you have a quorum for your membership meetings. So knowing those things are really important. Electing new officers, bylaws explain how the election process should work and how when a nominating committee should be formed. There is lots of information about dues, the actual legal name of your PTA. One of the attendees here were chatting privately, and he was kind of letting me know the official name, and he's right. The official name of your PTA is what is on your bylaws. So, for example, my kids went to Sherman. They say a lot of times they say Sherman Elementary PTA. Well, the official legal name is Sherman PTA. So just check your bylaws on that. Okay, so next slide, just dig in a little bit deeper so you can see if you haven't looked at bylaws before. This is a screenshot of the table of contents of a basic school unit PTA bylaws. And you can see the different topics, things that I pointed out that, and they do have a Spanish version as well. Unfortunately, there's no other languages that it's translated to, but raise your hand if you know where your PTA bylaws are. See one hand coming up. Gina, I know where you know where your PTA bylaws are. So this is something important. Again, join me this afternoon. We'll talk more about ways to share out with not just your members. If they ask for the bylaws, they need to be able to see them. There's not anything secret about them. So anyone that asks to see bylaws should be given a copy. But all board members should definitely be familiar with them. And in the next slide, here's just a few examples of other things you'll see in the bylaws. Again, who's on the executive board, what their job is and isn't, which officers your PTA has, how to call a special meeting. Like we had a special meeting just to do some brief business this morning. And so again, we'll get into that more later this afternoon if you join for that, or if you've watched the video recording later. So the next thing on our agenda is to look a little bit at the financial review. This is something that definitely happens at the end of every school year. It can also happen mid-year and helps you to just keep on track. So we conduct financial reviews in PTAs in order to build trust, transparency, and accountability with our members and the community. We're stewards over the resources that we have, and trust is one of our most important assets. So while financial management is rarely nefarious, it also helps us identify it and ways we can steward our resources more responsibly. So one way to make sure that your PTA is ready to receive financial review mid-year and year end is to see what is required at the beginning of the year. Then you can set up your PTA to run smoothly from the beginning. So this slide shows an example of when you have a PTA financial reviewer. Again, they're no longer called an auditor. So your financial reviewer will use a checklist like this to go through and make sure that you're just staying on track. Again, this helps with just transparency so that everyone knows that all the I's are being dotted, T's are crossed, all of that. We have several links that are going to be in the, I wanted to say show notes, but in the slide notes that also give you a lot more information about the financial review process. I think the next slide just gives a little breakout also. So you can see the sorts of things that your financial reviewer is going through. So again, the bottom line is if you kind of like reading a recipe, if you're a baker, you want to read through the recipe at the beginning and then before you start baking, and then you know that is needed and expected and you can keep up with that. Okay. And the next slide. So this is just another way that you might help think about for staying organized is the way that you do your file structure. So typically there's a lot less paper these days and everything is digital. So if you just start from the beginning of the year creating file folders that are very, organized, where you've got your executive board minutes and then as opposed to your general meeting minutes, and you keep your agendas in another folder and your financial reports in another folder. This just makes it very easy for your financial reviewer to go through and make sure that everything is in order. You can consider this file structure for, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever system works for you, and we're happy to help consult on that. I'm going to move on to the next. When you're doing your triage, so you've checked your bylaws, you're familiar with what's required financially, the PTA calendar is a great way to just stay organized month by month and know what's happening. So the next slide shows a document that we can let me see if I can put that in the chat for you so that you'll have this right away. Put that there. It's planning out your PTA year. So when you use this document, you'll actually click on it and it's going to force you to make a copy that you can save for yourself and add in anything else you'd like to add, or just make it specific for your group. Some of these things are the nice to have versus the required. The other two docs, let's see, we just reviewed, cover the need to do things, but it does include required things like when filings are due, there's Secretary of State and IRS. Those things we'll cover in the Treasurer's breakout room later this morning. Again, there's these nice to have things, but not all of this needs to be done. I think there's a second slide that continues on with the PTA calendar. And I'm just going to let you all kind of review that on your own, but this should really help you stay organized. Okay. So moving on to the next slide for culture and DEIB. A PTA that is inclusive, transparent, and welcoming is much more likely to be able to recruit volunteers, have people participate in activities, and also help with the sometimes boring behind the scenes work of managing a budget, filing tax returns, writing newsletters, and things like that. So while this area of work isn't required per se, it is something worth putting some thought into. So it might fit under the definition of triage if prioritizing activities that lead to long-term rewards counts to you. Again, DEIB is diversity, equity, inclusion, which leads to belonging. So it's a common acronym to see these days, and these are also priorities of the PTA. So putting an effort in advance to these will really help benefit the entire community. Let's see. So here's an idea. If you just set one goal, maybe it is that you want to focus on inviting and including everyone in the activities you plan and the meetings you hold. Think about how you would measure success. You would find a diverse group of people participating, staff, families of all cultures, economic backgrounds, abilities. How would you do that? Make a plan. Maybe you would think about how you're communicating about these activities. Are you communicating in all the languages that are needed? It is shared in a way that people can find the information. Are you giving enough notice to people to plan ahead? Are you partnering with the school and how they communicate? So these are all things that you can talk about as a board to make sure that you are involving as many type of people and as diverse in your diverse community. And next slide. Really think about, notice who's not participating and who's not in the room, and ask yourselves why. That can be part of a conversation that you might have over a summer board retreat when you're planning for your new year. And the next slide just reminds us that we're really working in partnership as a PTA. As Michelle mentioned, does your principal know that they have a voting seat on your board? Do you have a teacher representative on the board? There's always one teacher representative that's also a board member. Is there a healthy balance of the number of people involved. You want administration, you want staff involved, you want caregivers involved. A lot of schools partner with their SSC, their school site council. This can be really helpful. And staying involved with the other affinity groups, your English Learners Advisory Committee, the African American Parent Advisory Council, other affinity groups. You can invite them to join you in PTA meetings. And so all these things we were talking about just help to build our trust, transparency, and accountability. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is just to remember to simplify. So when we're going through our PTA triage and how can we've only got that small number of people, we really need to remember to simplify. So many of us who agree to be leaders in the PTA have a hard time saying no, and can easily be pressured to do everything. So, and you don't have to. So you'll burn out if you try. So let's talk about ways to simplify beyond just focusing on the essentials we've talked about already. So just a few ideas. One is you could simply hold fewer meetings. You can even make that official in your bylaws. Do fewer events and programs. There was a pretty robust PTA that I was involved with, and we took a summer retreat time, summer meeting time, and before we started the school year, we just really looked at all the events in the calendar and did a lot of streamlining. We prioritized things that took less volunteer effort and prioritized those things that were the most impactful. So just remember, you don't need to do it all. And the other thing is just committee. If you're a communications VP or chair, that doesn't mean that you need to do all the communications. It's not all on you. So share the responsibilities in a committee setting. Committees are also really helpful for bringing on new leadership. So when you ask someone to do something in a small way, maybe that's their first step in getting involved, and they can be the pipeline to some new leadership. And some resources. There are so many resources. Like we've said, you're not on an island here. A lot of people don't realize that there is that PTA structure, that it goes beyond just your school site. We're here for you as San Francisco 2nd District PTA. California PTA has tons of resources. They also have live webinars to join, the convention we've mentioned. So I'm going to just walk you through a few more resources as we're winding up here. The next slide here shows of all the PTA websites, this is likely the one that you're going to refer to the most. It's capta.org, capta.org. It can be a little unruly to work through. There's so much information on it, but it does have what you'll hear as the toolkit, where you can find answers to most of your burning questions about process and programs. Here is where you'll apply for grants and scholarships. Yes, the PTA has those. And find ideas for membership campaigns, the membership perks that people get. You'll find information about legislative conference in Sacramento, about the convention, just about job descriptions. There's so much information on capta.org. There's also another site on the next slide. You'll see that's a special site that is just for the California PTA leaders. This is the homepage of the leaders.capta.org, where you can find recordings of officer trainings again, various like monthly calls. If you're into communications, communications has a call, every month or so, as does the leadership team, as does the advocacy team. And so just in order to get access to this, you'll need to know your PTA's ID number. And that is information, guess what, where you can find it is in your bylaws. It's on the front page. Or you can always ask us if you're not able to find it. And then this next page, so we've got, we looked at capta.org, and we looked at the special leaders site from California PTA. This is our 2nd District PTA. So we have our own San Francisco website. This has things that's more specific to our own area, but it also, we put current information when we are offering trainings like this and such. The next slide shows there's also the National PTA. And this is the convention that's coming up this month, and that we're going to for National PTA, and that shows the new proposed dues rate. So that's something that we, five of us are going to National PTA virtually, and we'll be voting on things like the new dues rate proposed. So we want to get some feedback from all of you on that. The next slide shows, as we've mentioned, we do a lot of recordings of our trainings. This is our YouTube channel, has at least 60 videos so far, including many officer trainings, the 411 Wednesday meetings that Michelle mentioned, that you can just watch at your convenience. The 411 Wednesday meetings, again, those were something that we created during the pandemic to connect PTA leaders with others so that they didn't feel so isolated and lost, and also to provide information that can help you support your school. So they have topics like just even SF USD budgets and statewide legislative issues. We did a candidates forum. Things like that are all on our YouTube channel. The next slide shows that you may, we hope not, but need to learn more about insurance. The insurance website has this great listing here that's highlighted, red light, yellow light, green light, things that are definitely not okay under PTA insurance, things that are definitely okay, and things that you should really be careful about and take precautions with. The next slide is Ed100. This is a fabulous organization. They have a website that is written in accessible language that helps you understand how to make a difference in your school or district by helping you to better understand the education system in California. The site is broken into lessons, as you can see here, and you could go through this as a school community. You could bring this to your next PTA meeting and just ask everyone in advance to go over one lesson and talk about that as a group. Or you could just use the lessons like articles that you can read on your own time. And so this, again, when you get the slide deck, you'll have all these URLs and resources at your hands, at your fingertips. And I just want to open it up to Q&A. That was a lot of information, but these are like some of the key ways to help you stay organized if it's just a few of you working together. Any questions come up in the chat? And if there's no additional questions about that, we can definitely take a break.
I feel surprised there's no questions. Maybe it was just so much information.
Are there, I'm kind of coming in as a newbie. I mean, what are the challenges? So we went through like, this is what we do, this is what we're obligated to do. Where do people fall down? What are the difficult things?
I think that some of the challenges might be actually addressed in our, after we take a break, we're going to talk about facilitating effective meetings and how to increase inclusion. Those are some of the common challenges that we do, hear about is, just how to be efficient, effective, and just bringing in leaders that represent our whole community and helping everyone to feel welcome and like they belong.
I feel like the most common questions that we hear, or at least that I hear people that PTAs contact me about, or concerns or challenges they're facing, are around recruiting new officers, like getting their positions filled. Sometimes it's finding volunteers generally to help, but it seems more often that filling officer positions. We get contacted. Certainly we don't get contacted by the vast majority of our PTAs about this, but often we'll have folks contact us about some kind of conflict that they're having in their PTA when they need some help kind of figuring out, people have different communication styles or things like that. Or that's why this triage training is that some people are brand new. They have a full transition of new officers because people their kids have graduated or something. And so you end up having a whole bunch of new officers and like, we don't know what to do. Please help us. What are the most essential things? And so that's why we just did the triage one, because if you can focus on a few of those, that'll help you know where to start to put your efforts. But I think those are the most common things I hear about. I don't know if Melissa or other PTA, the second district people want to talk about the challenge. And a lot of those we are trying to address in all these different sessions today. We're trying to address all of those things. Are there other things that come up, Melissa, for you or any of the other board members who?
That was a good summary. What you said, it's the most common things we hear about.
I'd
I
add
have a,
something. Sorry, Melissa,
Oh,
Michelle.
go ahead.
I'm Yvette Edwards. I'm the executive vice president, outgoing executive vice president for the second district PTA. And I guess I would add also, Michelle, that there are oftentimes conflicts between the wants and needs and understanding of budgetary sort of responsibilities between the site, the PTA, and that can create conflicts. I think we've had a lot of conversations with units over the last couple of years between administration and just really making sure that everyone understands their roles. So that's something that I always kind of flag for people early on at the beginning of the year to just really make sure you're setting the expectations properly for what the PTA does and what the site does.
Thank you for raising that. That was top of my mind because our school we have a fairly new board. We have a lot of people who are leaving after 8 years with the school, and this is my first year on the board. And so we did a budget last year, but I was unaware about the financial audit, and I'm hoping, like, would that be something that you cover this afternoon? Because I don't want to go in blind in August and have no idea about this financial audit or the system or how we budget or everything. So I'm hoping that's going to come up later in training. And also, but it's just something I don't know about. I'm glad you raised it, but will it be coming up later?
Yes, well, hi, I'm Sheila Santos, the treasurer, and Claire and I will be giving the financial training, and so yes, that is, we'll be covering that.
And
So
we
with-
also have a full recording in our YouTube channel that's only specific to was at that time called the audit, but the same procedure would be followed, and we would probably offer that again come that time of year.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, and so it's not the only time, it's today. There's recordings to watch on your own time today, and we'll be doing it again in the future. And
Yes.
I think that financial review sometimes just does sound more scary than it is. And we want to help reduce that anxiety.
Yeah, it's nice. Melissa sort of presented the checklist, and it looks like a lot of information there. But if you break it down, there's only really a few key things that you need to do, especially if you're a treasurer and everybody has been making sure they've been doing everything monthly. It's usually pretty straightforward.
I think part of being able to, and why we listed that as kind of a key place to start is because there are different sections to it. Some things are like the minutes, for instance. And so we have, if you send people to the secretary training, or if they can't make it, you share the slide deck and, have them watch the video, and if they understand what's supposed to be in the minutes and they're doing that job, then that's really easy because they have the minutes are done and they recorded the things they need to. And then you can make the bank transitions the way, and so they know their job and they do it. So that's no problem on the financial review because they know what they're doing. If the treasurer knows what they're doing with the financial reports monthly and they go to that training, that's fine. So it's a matter of just like putting it all together. And then, and it is really helpful to have a central place where you organize all your files. So that's a really good thing that you can do at the beginning of your year, is say, what do we have now? Is it all organized in a way that didn't follow the person who's leaving our PTA, that it's in a, right? Because that happens all the time, is somebody has it in their personal Google folder, Google Drive. And so can you create a PTA email address that owns the Google Drive where all the stuff goes in so that it doesn't get lost when people leave the PTA? Or you start a Dropbox. We have permanent files in a Dropbox folder that, again, is a PTA email address, and it just gets shared with the new people. And we have a file structure for the second district of where we can find our meeting agendas and our meeting minutes and the financial, everything's organized. And so it's really straightforward to do that review. But that file structure is a very easy sit down in a half an hour and then tell people, okay, this is how we're going to do the naming so we all can find everything. That's a really good place to start. Are there other questions? Melissa, shall we just, maybe we'll give everybody a 15-minute break and just start the next section early?
That's good with me.
Okay, so what should we do? So bring everybody back, come here at 10:50, go refill your coffee mugs or stretch, and we'll start again at 10:50.
Sounds good. 10:50.
Sounds good.